The Forgotten Prayer. When the Parker family faced losing everything, it was an old, forgotten prayer from their grandmother that unexpectedly changed their fate. Could a prayer prayed long ago really turn things around? You might be surprised at what happened next. The struggles of the Parker family. The Parker family had lived in Willow Creek, Texas, for as long as anyone could remember. Generations of Parkers had worked the same land, planting crops, raising cattle, and building a life. It wasn't just the land they tended, it was the history of their family, their legacy. But in recent years, Willow Creek had been suffering from an unrelenting drought. What used to be a booming farming community was now struggling, and the Parkers were no exception. The last few harvests had been dismal. The crops withered under the harsh sun, and the cattle grazed on land that was once lush but now barely a patch of grass. Sarah Parker, the youngest daughter, had watched her parents' spirits fall with every empty season. Her father, Tom, had spent years working the farm, but at 54, he was tired, and the toll the drought had taken was visible in the lines of his face. He'd seen his family's future slip away, and there didn't seem to be anything they could do to stop it. "Dad, what are we going to do?" Sarah had asked him one night as they sat on the front porch, the sky dark with no promise of rain. Tom didn't answer at first. Instead, he just stared into the distance, his hands resting heavily on the arms of his chair. "It's out of our hands now, sweetheart," he said quietly. "We'll have to wait and see if the bank gives us another chance. Otherwise, the land, it's gone." The thought of losing the family farm, everything her ancestors had worked for, was unbearable for Sarah. The feeling of helplessness began to weigh on her chest like a stone. A Forgotten Prayer. That very night, as Sarah was cleaning up after dinner, she stumbled upon a dusty old box in the attic. The box had belonged to her grandmother, a woman who was deeply religious and who had passed away several years ago. Sarah had always admired her grandmother for her unwavering faith, but she never truly understood the depth of it until now. As she opened the box, it was full of old photographs, letters, and small keepsakes from a time long gone. One item caught her eye, a weathered leather-bound journal. Sarah opened it, revealing page after page of handwritten prayers, some of which were personal, others written with the wisdom of years of hardship. But it was one prayer, written on the very last page, that grabbed her attention. It was a prayer for divine protection and guidance during times of trouble, asking for a miracle when all seemed lost. The prayer was written decades ago, but the words felt as though they were meant for her, right then, at that very moment. With a deep breath, Sarah read the prayer aloud. "Lord, we are at our wits' end. The land is dry, and we are weary. But we trust in your will, that you will provide for us, as you always have." There was nothing extraordinary about the prayer itself, but something in the room shifted as Sarah finished. The air felt still, like the world had paused for just a second. It was a quiet peace that settled in her heart, though she couldn't explain why. She wasn't expecting a miracle. She wasn't expecting anything at all, but for the first time in a long while, Sarah felt a glimmer of hope. The unexpected call. The following morning, Sarah awoke to a ringing phone. It was the bank. Her heart sank. She'd been dreading this call for weeks, knowing they were just days away from losing the farm. But when the voice on the other end spoke, it wasn't what Sarah expected to hear. "We've reviewed your request, and we've decided to grant you an extension," the voice said. "We're giving you another 6 months to make the necessary payments." The terms are better than before. You'll have the time you need. Sarah's mind raced. Could this be real? Could the bank have actually agreed to help them? It didn't make sense. But there it was, a lifeline thrown their way when they had none left. She ran to find her father. Tom was sitting at the kitchen table, his face in his hands, lost in thought. When she told him about the call, he looked up, his eyes wide with disbelief. "This can't be," he said. "I've never heard of a bank doing this. Not in this economy, not with our situation." But as the days passed, things began to change. The weather, which had been unforgiving for months, started to show signs of life. It began with a small drizzle, a teasing drop of rain here and there, but then it grew into a steady, soaking rainfall that lasted for days. The crops that had seemed lost began to thrive once again, and soon the Parker family was back on their feet. Tom and Sarah both felt something was different. The rain, the bank's extension, the turn of events, it all felt like something beyond coincidence. Was it just luck, or was it something else? The power of faith. Months later, when the farm was back in full swing, Sarah found herself sitting at the same kitchen table, looking out at the fields that had once seemed so barren. Her father was there too, taking a long drink from his coffee cup. "I still don't understand what happened, Sarah," Tom said, his voice full of awe. "It was like the impossible just happened. Like someone up there was looking out for us." Sarah smiled softly. Maybe someone was. She didn't have all the answers. They never did. But one thing was certain. Their family had been given a second chance. And as she glanced at the old prayer journal on the shelf, she couldn't help but think that her grandmother's faith, passed down through the generations, had somehow made all the difference. Aftermath. The Parker family's story spread quickly through Willow Creek, and it wasn't long before people were calling it a miracle. They didn't know exactly how it all happened. They didn't know why the bank had made such an unexpected offer, or why the rain had come when it did. But they did know one thing. They had experienced something they couldn't explain, something beyond chance. And for the Parkers, that was enough.